The interesting thing I would say about Chris Evans as an actor, if you think about it, is that he played the Human Torch, Johnny Storm, in the two Fantastic Four movies that came out in the early 2000s. And then the next superhero role he did was Captain America Steve Rogers in the MCU. So within the comic book genre, before the MCU, Chris Evans wasn't really a big actor. He wasn't super well known because people would, for the most part, say that, yeah, those Fantastic Four movies that came out in the early 2000s are not the worst comic book movies ever made. They're not as bad as Batman and Robin, Elektra, Catwoman, the Duck, Howard the Duck. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Most people would say, yeah, the two Fantastic Four films are not as bad as any of those huge disasters, but they're not that good either. They're just fine at best. On top of that, Chris Evans is playing a more arrogant, jerkish character in Johnny Storm. And he went from that to playing Steve Rogers, someone who is a paragon, someone who is very straight laced, has a strong moral compass, a more black and white view of right and wrong, someone who will always do the right thing no matter what, and keeps that fundamental goodness in him even when the world around Steve is broken. Steve himself is never broken. That's what's powerful about Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Steve very much is a shining example of what America should be but never actually is. I think it's interesting that in the comic book genre, Chris Evans went from playing a more arrogant, show off character, a more arrogant, show off, jerkish character like Johnny Storm, in two comic book movies that weren't received horribly, like some of the worst comic book disasters, but weren't received very well either. The reviews are both movies are not very good, and I would also say that they're fine at best. They're kind of mediocre, not that good. I enjoy Rise of the Silver Surfer more, but it's still not great. And then you get to the MCU, and Chris Evans is playing someone so noble and virtuous, like Steve Rogers, someone who's such a good person, fundamentally speaking. I think it's pretty interesting, to be honest. It was a big jump for him, so that's pretty fascinating.